Welcome everybody to this webinar, which is being brought to you today through the Oxford Education Deanery and the Education Training and Climate Hub. My name's Laura Mulway. It's my real pleasure to open the webinar today and to welcome everybody in. And I'm just going to talk for a couple of moments about what the Oxford Education Deanery is, in case anybody joining us today isn't aware, and then I will pass over to Kim Polgreen, who will be chairing the webinar today. So one very important thing to address right at the start of the event is that we would love to hear your feedback. Let us know what you enjoyed, what you found interesting, and also if there is anything that we can do to make events like these more effective for you in the future. So if you are able to scan that QR code now, so it's ready loaded on your phone for at the end of the event, that'll be wonderful. I will also put the link into the chat at the end of the event so that you can access it then. But I know that it's very common to sort of need to rush off to make dinner to get on with your evening at the end of these events. So I want to flag that up to you now. Thank you in advance for giving us your time for that. A little bit more about the Oxford Education Deanery. We are the outreach, I suppose, branch of the Department of Education here at the University of Oxford. We have as our mission to empower education practitioners and policy professionals to understand, use, and also co-produce high-quality research evidence in education. And so to that end, we run a range of events and webinars like this one. We also have some online learning offerings that are targeted at teachers, researchers, and policy professionals. You can see some examples there of free to access courses on our website. We have a knowledge hub where anyone interested can access a bit more information about the research coming out of the department. We produce short, easy to read summaries of our department's research. And so you can go and have a little look at those. Those are called Deanery Digests. We have a growing podcast series. So if you're someone who prefers to listen to your research rather than read it, you could check those out. And after events like these, very often we will produce a resource pack. So if there are any lesson plans or resources that come out of these, you can access those as well online. If you're interested and you're not already joined up to our mailing list, please sign up. We won't spam you with everything. When you sign up to the mailing list, you can indicate the areas of interest that you might have. So if you're a teacher of biology, you can indicate that you're interested in science. If you're here on this webinar, I suspect you might be ticking sort of climate related research, and then you will only be emailed about those issues that could be of relevance to you. Because you're here in this webinar, you are probably already well aware of the Oxford Education Deanery Sustainability Team, who are a fabulous group of teachers and researchers doing work in the climate and sustainability space. And it's this team that bring the webinar to you today. So if you'd like to stay in contact with this team, they also have their own page on our website, and you can connect with them there. Last little slide from me is about our other upcoming events. If you know of anybody who might be interested in language research, our last events of the school year have a language focus. So there's a book about mentoring teachers in the secondary school who are teachers of languages event tomorrow. There's a networking session looking at singing in the primary school classroom coming up, and then two conference events looking at research into teaching Chinese and research into teaching EAL students. So if you or your colleagues might be interested, please do pass those on. We're really pleased to say that for in-person events now, we have a scholarship which reduces the cost of coming to the department to take part in these kind of things, right down to about 20% of the full economic cost. and that is particularly targeted at teachers or other professionals working in challenging contexts. So if that might be something of interest, please do take a look. And that's all from me. Thank you so much for listening. I will now pass you over to Kim, who will chair the webinar today. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you so much, Laura. Amazing things going on in the deanery there. So let's begin. We know that there's growing evidence that nature has positive impacts on humans, don't we? And for those of us who enjoy spending time in nature ourselves, we feel that intuitively, don't we? So Professor Kathy Willis here at Oxford University, in her book, Good Nature, has pulled together all the scientific evidence for how nature affects us biologically. She's a biologist. She cites studies that it's VOCs, volatile organic compounds, that we breathe in, fractal shapes of the trees, colours, sounds, etc. And in addition, what I see in my work, and as many others do who work in nature, is that nature can be a setting for strengthening human-to-human connections. And that's really intriguing about how that works. But how can we translate the research and our personal experiences of teaching in and about nature into something useful and practical for schools? How can schools harness the power of nature to help their students and staff thrive? And this is what we're exploring today. So my name is Kim Polgreen. I'm a sustainability educator and I specialise in nature education for teenagers. We have 9 other experts here today with different pieces of the puzzle to answer this question. And of course, we have you, all of you are here today with the experience and knowledge that you're undoubtedly bringing to this meeting. The format for the next hour and a bit is that I'm going to pose a question to each of our panelists in turn to create a narrative through this topic. They'll have 5 minutes each to make their point. And your role, everybody else on this call, is to keep the chat lively with your thoughts, questions and answers as we go through this hour. The panelists, I hope, will also contribute to the chat as we go along. Halfway through their contributions, we'll pause for you to gather your thoughts and put down some more comments. And at the end, if everybody keeps to time, we should have about 20 minutes for Q&A, picking up some of the questions you put in the chat. So to begin, the main piece of research that is forming the basis of this webinar is what we refer to as the Agile Project. It's one of a series of one-year projects on environmental issues funded by the Natural Environment Research Council, particularly through the Oxford Martin School at Oxford University. The project has been led by researchers at the Department of Psychiatry, several of whom are here today, and there's been regular contact with civil servants from the Department for Education who have really guided and fed into this project. So a quick introduction to the panelists now. Perhaps you wave as I mention your name, and I'll expand a little about what they do when I put a question to them. So in the order in which they'll be speaking, Dr. Katrin Wilhelm is a senior researcher on the Agile Project, and we'll be explaining a little bit more about it. Dr. Roger Caseby is a wellbeing officer at the Botanic Gardens and Arboretum here in Oxford and has been part of the Agile team. Dr. Wendy Zhang is an Oxford postdoctoral researcher who's recently joined the Leverhulme Centre for Nature Recovery and is looking particularly at green space and wellbeing in schools. Stuart Bassett is Assistant Head for Inclusion and SEND from Burford School. Give us a wave, Stuart. I didn't see you come in. Saba Arshad is another member of the Agile team working on the economic cost benefit model for nature in schools, which is intriguing. That's where the real evidence lies. Dr. Jess Tipton leads the National Education Nature Park, which is a fantastic government initiative to get more nature into school grounds, and it's led by Jess from the Natural History Museum with partners, the Royal Horticultural Society and others. Jo Boyle is a nature practitioner and researcher at the moment working on many projects, but including one funded also through the Oxford Martin School, co-producing a set of principles for how to do good nature education in schools. And Alex Haste, who's going to speak nearly last, is from the DFE and has been key to this Agile project. So if that's all clear, I'm going to turn first of all to Katrin. So Katrin, this has been a significant piece of work. Can you explain briefly what did you want to find out and why?
Thank you very much, Kim, and also to the Deanery to providing this space for us and then to have this conversation. Hello, everyone. I'm Katrin. I should probably front load my spiel of which is only going to be 1 minute. I'm based in 2 different departments, and that's already an indicator of how interdisciplinary this project is and has been. So with one leg, I'm in geography, coming from an ecology environmental point of view. With the other leg, where I'm right now, is psychiatry. So I'm looking at mental health in youth particularly. And to answer Kim's question, so it divides into two parts. So let's start with what we've been doing. And I'm just going to give like a brief umbrella overview because Jess and Saba will guide you through the hard evidence we found in the project. So the idea in the funding really allows us as researchers and academics to bridge a gap between policy and research, which has been identified by NERC. And so what this entails is for scientists and researchers to respond to certain policy calls. Now, in our instance, that's slightly different because the policy was already out there, or is already out there. It's about sustainability education. But what we had identified is that what comes with sustainability education is also a concern around the environment and nature, and then climate change and biodiversity loss. So this is when we became really interested in what does this actually do to mental health in youth. And to explore the evidence here, we set up 3 different work streams within the project. One of the streams looks at the literature, and Jessica is going to talk a bit more about that, the written evidence. But Kim and Roger, who are also on this call, looked at the stakeholders as well. We had some interviews there. And then finally, Saba is going to talk about the cost-benefit model everyone gets really excited about. And so I'm looking forward to hear more about that too. And what we tried to do here is to find a comprehensive picture, a coherent picture of the evidence which is out there. Because as you might have seen or heard already, there's a huge wave of attention being paid to nature-based solutions and programs and green prescribing. Now we're coming, or I, as a scientist, come to this quite skeptically, and I want to understand not only what kind of evidence is out there, but also the robustness of that evidence. And what we mean by that is, do people use the same method to assess whether a program is successful or not successful? Do people actually look at whether nature in schools has only positive effects or also negative effects? And with negative, I want you to think about allergies, for example, right? So if someone has, like we just talked about hay fever an hour ago, so this needs to be considered when evaluating evidence around nature-based programs. And then finally, we wanted to understand how the evidence might align with the curriculum and the educational goals nationally, regionally, and locally. So that's the what bit of the question. Now, why? The reason why we paid really attention to the nature-based programs wave and youth, particularly in secondary schools, is the rise of mental health issues around this age group after COVID. So that was one of the main incentives to look at mental health and potential solutions here outside of the clinic and outside or like beyond NHS waiting lists. And we've identified schools as the key or playing a key role in this whole equation around mental health, youth provision, nature-based solution and programs, because for some kids, the green space or green estates or assets, as some people call it, in school is often the only place where they will experience green exposure or will be able to engage with nature productively. And finally, to just conclude this in a nutshell introduction, we then, of course, are interested in how can we translate what we find in our study, the robustness of the evidence and the breadth of insights back into national policy and local and regional policy. So what I mean by that is, how can schools use that evidence in managing and maintaining their green estate in school? But we're also thinking about regional impact. And then, of course, the GFE is present here with Alex Hastie and colleagues. We've been discussing for the last 9 months what that actually means across the country and for governmental policy, and how can this be translated up across the whole of the UK.
Thank you
And
so
that's my
much,
spiel.
Katrin. That's brilliant, brilliant time setting for everybody else. So I'm going to move to Jessica. Could you give us a wave? Jessica, also on the Agile project, you were deeply involved in the initial literature review, and you're now writing up the findings. So you probably know it better than everybody. And I've just realised I didn't introduce you at the beginning, did I? So many apologies, but Jessica is so busy, she won't notice. She's busy writing up her DPhil and doing a major postdoctoral role on this project. So you found initially over 700 relevant papers. That's after it had come down for the 15,000 or so, and you whittled them down to 22 papers which you felt were relevant. Most of them, I think you were thinking, were not particularly robust, showing a clear need for some additional research, as you were explaining this morning in another meeting. But what, if anything, can be said from these previous studies about the impact of nature on mental health and well-being in secondary schools?
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction, Katrin, particularly kind of setting up this project really well. Like both Kim and Katrin have said, this project has a bunch of different components to it: the interviews, the cost-benefit model, and the review of the literature. And it's been really exciting to work kind of across these different spheres to kind of create a body of evidence for y'all. So first, to really clarify, what we started finding when we looked at the literature is, while there's this growing interest in nature-based programs for young people's mental health, most of the existing literature right now focuses on primary school settings. So what we were really interested in as a group was to kind of get a better understanding of how nature is being used in the secondary school context with students 10 to 18, and whether nature has an impact on mental health and well-being at that level. Like both Kim and Katrin both said, we really wanted to also explore the quality of evidence itself. So again, not only if evidence was available out there, but if it actually met the standards we expect for evidence-based interventions, like robust controls, kind of quality, sample sizes, things like that. So in terms of what we actually found, we did identify kind of 22 relevant studies, both qualitative and quantitative research, across a wide range of nature-based programs. So 7 of them were in-school horticulture or gardening programs. 4 were outdoor education, where classes were just conducted in natural settings. And all of them really looked at the mental health and well-being benefits, or lack thereof, of these types of nature-based interventions. We found the majority of the studies really did report positive effects, particularly reducing anxiety, reducing stress. There were also some reports of academic or cognitive benefits, but these findings are a lot weaker and less consistent, and honestly not measured as much. So that's a really big gap on what we could do kind of going forward. Something else that was really interesting about that the research is that we started seeing kind of potential mechanisms in how the nature-based programs might support mental health and well-being. And so that was things like school connectedness. So many type of nature-based programs seem to be a area where young people could feel more of a sense of belonging, experience more pro-social behavior, really kind of connect to their peers more, as well as nature connectedness. So potentially there is something about emotional connections with nature which may play a role. But I would like to clarify that these things were still varied quite widely across studies in how they were measured, and the definitions were kind of quite varied. So because of that, and all kind of the kind of moderators I've said, we really are concerned about the overall quality of evidence available in this field, and think that there's a lot of really good space that we can do to actually drive this forward and create more robust evidence. We need to kind of increase the rigor of our studies. We need to at least map the significant spread of program designs, of outcomes. We're doing such interesting work within this space, and I think it's really important of us to be able to map it well and to be able to maybe compare different programs on their mental health and well-being outcomes. And in that way, we could do something like create a meta-analysis for any academics here. We also were really interested in looking at, and what we found was lacking is looking at studies that reported any type of effectiveness between different demographic groups, between different types of students, between different types of schools. And that would be another area that would really interesting research could come out of.
Yes, I think I think we can go into so much about what we could do, but I'm going to leave it there if that's all right with you. Hopefully we can come back to that in questions. I'm going to turn to you, Roger. You've got a huge amount of direct experience of the impact of nature on young people through your work at the Botanic Gardens and Arboretum, and through the Agile project. We've had a fantastic opportunity to compare notes with other educators. So you and I interviewed 16 teachers from a range of different settings. Stuart is here today, who's been a big part of this, and we interviewed him. Can you give us sort of what were your top 3 take-home points that would be useful for our audience here today?
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, and we should say thank you to all those teachers who participated. It's an anonymized study, so we can't name them, but they all gave very generously of their time. And many of them are clearly pioneers in this area. There's a lot I could say here, but I've chosen themes that I think apply to all schools rather than particular groups of students that there might be nature-based interventions for, or particular types of schools. One thing that came through very clearly was the perceived challenges of teaching outside in nature compared to the structured environment of the classroom. Those challenges were often around risk management, the experience or inexperience of teachers teaching outside of the classroom, and concerns about possible changes in student behaviour. Those are all understandable concerns. But the good news is, judging from the answers we got in interviews, is that the solutions are probably already there in schools. There are colleagues experienced in outdoor education. There are protocols for risk management, and generally the impact on student behaviour is positive, not just at the time of the intervention nature-based programme, but in the long term. And so even for a teacher who's thinking about this, who's just starting out, there are probably colleagues either in your school or in other schools who can advise and support you. Another factor that teachers mentioned was curriculum pressure, how to make room for nature-based programs in the face of the volume of curriculum content. Now, how to make room for X, whatever X is, in and make space within the curriculum is not new, and it's undoubtedly a challenge there. And it's not surprising that many of those teachers already involved in nature-based programs are teaching subjects, maybe geography, biology, where there's already an outdoor element of teaching. But we did hear many examples where the benefits were perceived to be so great that it was worth making the move outside the classroom. And that view was held both by individual teachers taking an initiative as part of their teaching, but also for staff in schools where there was really an integrated program across the school. At school level, a decision had been taken that this was worth while. Those benefits included direct positive impact on student well-being, positive impacts on peer relationships and relationships between students and adults, and also the wider impact in the community. Also things like the emergence of leadership skills, which weren't being seen in a classroom, but were being seen in a nature-based context, and as well as the positive impact on the well-being of the teachers themselves. And that also brings me on to the final point. There are schools where experiencing nature has become part of the culture of the community. And that move to a sustainable, strategic and operational support alleviates much of the load from the individual teacher. Time for nature-based programs is scheduled into the timetable, so the teacher doesn't have to think, how am I going to find time for this, because they've already got timetable time. Funding has already been allocated. Staff receive training because it's known that they're going to have to do these things, and student needs are anticipated and supported, and parents and carers understand the value of time spent in this way. And it's our hope that the learning we've got from the teachers we interviewed will help us to develop a better understanding of nature-based programs in practice and a model for implementing them in schools.
It's fantastic, Roger. There's so much richness in those conversations that we had. I'm really looking forward to writing all that up. But thank you so much for giving us some insights. So I can now turn to Wendy. So Wendy, you're not part of the Agile project, but you're doing something which is really sort of parallel, and that you and I have been talking about quite a bit. So you're looking at the relationships between green space in schools and mental health and well-being, and particularly we've been talking together about the importance of absence from schools as a marker of mental health and well-being. So can you give us a sort of brief update on the correlations that you found so far?
Thanks so much, King, and thanks so much for the invitation. So as King kindly mentioned, although I'm not part of the Agile team, but I know the people here, the Catherine and everybody through the eco-flourishing thing at the Department of Psychiatry. So I'm a postdoc founded by the Department of Geography and also have founded by the Oxford Biomedical Research Center at the moment. So my research is mainly looking at mental health benefits from urban green and blue spaces. And one of the population group is the school kids. So my research is more on the practical side about population level green exposure and mental health. I tested the relationship on the exposure to greenness and the students' mental well-being, exposure to greenness and the students' absence rate using the Oxford student survey data. So this data have two waves. So at the moment, I got the result from the 2023 wave. So that involves all the 60 secondary schools, mostly in Liverpool and Oxfordshire. Student number around 15,000. So we detected some interesting regional differences. Like for instance, the greenness in the Liverpool doesn't really help with students' mental health and well-being, but in Oxfordshire is positive and has positive and a significant benefit for student mental and well-being. And the other interesting selling over here, the association is we find for the students in the ethnic minority groups, so the non-white students, actually the greenness matters more for their mental well-being. On the other dimension of the relationship for the greenness to the absence, we detected association of number of trees and a percentage of the canopy on the school grounds associated with student absence rates, as in more greenness, lower absence rate. We also throw this idea, I think Jess is here in the panel. So we throw this idea to the National Education Nature Park earlier, and we want to test it and expand. We want to kind of like expand this collaboration and test more through the National Education Nature Park, citizen science mapping of greenness, objective mapping of greenness, and then we link that to does that matter to the student absence? And we can also check, does that matter to the student mental well-being? I will test the same kind of like hypothesis and correlation in the 2025 wave. So all this gonna be in kind of hopefully put in one paper. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Brilliant, keeping to time. Right, I'm going to move now, finally, before we take a little pause, to Stuart. Stuart, are you somewhere on the call? I can't see you. If you put your camera on, then you'll pop up.
Hello, I am here.
Top.
Hopefully you can hear me.
Okay, but no camera. That's
Sorry.
fair enough. That's fine.
I think my camera is working. I can see myself. I don't know.
Yeah, I can see. He's like in the
That's
screen.
right.
There you go. I saw you.
There we go.
There we go. So Stuart, you're assistant head at Burford School, not too far from Oxford, for inclusion and SEND. And I've been to your school several times and really enjoyed it to see how you're using your substantial green spaces to support the mental health and well-being of particular students and the whole school. I'm learning more every time I come, and we're rating this up as a case study. But can you explain to us in a few minutes why, this is quite a hard question, why do you take the use of nature in your school so seriously?
I think, well, I can't lie. We are blessed with a very large site, like you said, Kim, and we have heritage within the school, a long heritage of farming and agriculture that stems back to when we were founded, a few hundred years ago. And up until very recently, since I've been working there, we did have a small farm, and that moved into a a small holding sort of type area that we were able to keep going. Unfortunately, because of COVID, bits of that went away, but the ethos and the feeling and the understanding of being outside and working with the land has stayed very, very strong within the school. And because of the nature of our site, and interesting, Wendy mentioned about canopy and green spaces, all of our students within a matter of seconds, because we've got lots of different buildings, are stepping out into green space. And what we recognize and notice straight away is that during those transitions, because students can immediately step outside into the fresh air, they get a break from lessons, but the atmosphere as students are moving around the school site is very, very calm, because they're coming out, they're immediately in the fresh air, under the trees, moving between different buildings. And within that, we ask teachers as much as possible to take the opportunities, like we talk to the children about taking opportunities, to get outside. So if there's a classroom at this time of year, we had English lessons outside today, we had our music department working outside, PE department, geography were outside at one point. We've got 120 students out on Duke of Edinburgh today, because we're always getting the children out as soon as possible. And I think what we have noticed, and we've been looking at our attendance data very, very closely over the last year or so, that we are now well above national averages in terms of attendance data from almost all groups within the school that you would want to track and monitor. We are our wellbeing survey. We were part of the Oxwell survey too, and we do our internal tracking, that our students appear to be very, very happy, and that's a continuing trend over the last few years. The more and more we've preached to the students about getting outside, and we've been able to engage students who haven't been able to step foot on the school site for a number of years now due to emotional based school avoidance. We've been able to work with them in nature in different areas of our site, from our small woodland area to our sort of horticulture and gardening spaces. We've planted an orchard, because it brings a real community cohesion about developing the site, a sense of belonging for the students, and they feel a part of that process too. So the next sort of stages are about how the students can be involved in bringing more outside spaces into the curriculum, or for each term in the year, the students are now planning how we can harvest different produce from the site, whether it's cherries that are starting to ripen in our trees. We found a plum tree as well, bizarrely, in the hedge yesterday. We're planning things out so that can feed into our food technology department, but also the canteen, and also engage it within the PSHE program. Initially, that's going to be more based within Key Stage 3, because there's more flex, and that's a really good piece of advice for all schools, where you do have that flex within the curriculum to get students more involved and outdoors, or whether it's science or geography, even history, going out, taking walks outside, seeing what's out there on the school site and what you can talk about. Any opportunity you can, build it into Key Stage 3, because it's a little bit easier to make mistakes in those areas of the curriculum. If it doesn't quite go right, you can adapt it for next time. It's not related to a GCSE or something. But if you're getting more and more students earlier out and involved in those sort of outdoor opportunities earlier, that then carries through into the school, and then you're only working on one year group at a time. And that's, you know, some of the work that we've done over the last few years. Sorry, Kim, I don't know if that's summed that up for you or not, but it's very important to us.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic, Stuart. Gosh, I should only give you 5 minutes every time, then I'd just get so much more. It's incredible. I learn something every time you tell me about it. So thank you very much indeed. So that's a lot of input, isn't it? So I thought we'd just take a couple of minutes pause, or maybe just a minute, for you to just have a little think about what you've heard so far, and formulate a question so that you can actually sort of have your own headspace, or a comment. We'd really, really love to hear from you what your experience is of engaging young people with nature, of any age, or indeed adults. So I'm going to shut up for 1 minute and see what happens. If nothing happens, I shall carry on.
I think I saw Alex kindly post some questions in there, or is it okay to maybe provide a brief answer or something?
Wendy, I'll come back to questions at the end. I just want to sort of give people a chance to just think without having to listen at the same time. That's all right. But I will come back to that one because that was a key question. Thanks, Alex. Okay, we have a silent audience. So maybe you'll think of a few more things if we carry on. Oh, Nigel said regarding health benefits. Oh, that's an interesting one. I think the answer is we don't know at the moment, but we can come back to that in questions. Okay, so oh yes, a few things coming in here. Fantastic. Thank you, Jess. So I'm going to carry on back with our panelists so that we don't run out of time and we can have more chat at the end. So Saba, can I turn to you? Where are you? Are you on camera? Give us a wave. There you are. I can see you now. So you're also a researcher on the Agile project, and you've been doing a kind of parallel work stream in a way of trying to answer the vitally important question of why do it at all? So the cost benefit analysis. So from what you've seen and heard and examined so far, what might be the overall net benefits to a school and the wider society, if that's something you've looked at?
Yes, thank you, Kim. It was a really fruitful discussion, and we have like a lot of insights. I think that's what the literature is also talking about. Is it's always a trade-off. Like when we are talking about implementing any intervention, which include nature-based programs as well within school setting, it always have trade-offs, which we have to think about. And then when we started with this cost benefit analysis of this in nature-based project program intervention with like having a more universal kind of intervention. So the literature has highlighted that these kind of interventions always have a J-shaped curve. So it's maybe from the even like teachers point of view, from the implementation point of view, from the policy making point of view, we will always see upfront cost on a higher side as compared to the benefits, because these kind of interventions comes up with their benefit shows kind of at a later stage of the project implementation. So that's why we call it as a J-shaped curve. We have cost on a higher side first, and then we have longer after like on a time series, we will say benefits quite later. And these benefits has, if we start from even by looking at just simple one example of school resources, for instance. So whenever we imply an intervention at a school level, maybe at one side of the equation is like we are spending additional school resources, and that's bringing cost at the start of the program. But when we look at on the other side of the equation, we have actually this kind of interventions from school resources. It is taking long-term burdens on teachers, which is an unsaid thing. Like whenever we speak to teachers, they always felt like they are overburdened. If they have students with SEN needs, or if they have students with mental health and well-being issues. So if there is no intervention, these teachers have more long-term consequences. For example, teachers would always feel overburdened, and there is a higher chances of actually they are going for the leaves, sick leaves, or they are even leaving their jobs. And these consequences, when we do the net benefits of the net cost and benefit analysis of these things, they will ultimately, we will find at the long term, we have actually looking at the net present value of the intervention cost as today, and after 5 years, they may be just like, if they are not like trading off, at least they are balancing out each other. And the same goes when we are looking at the wider community benefits. So any intervention, including NBPs, they if they are improving one child's mental health and well-being, this is actually kind of like reducing long-term burdens on the wider community. For example, housing benefits, employment benefits, even linking to the criminal justice level. So when we are looking at the overall economic level, the pennies or pounds we are spending today, they are actually gonna balance out in the near future or in the long-term benefits. So that's what the whole cost benefit analysis model we were working within this project.
Yeah, that's so important, Sabra. I'm sure that's music to Stuart's ears in particular. So how much money you're saving society, Stuart. Thank you so much. That's fantastic. So turning to Jess Tipton now. So Jess, you're heading up, I think it's one of the most important nature projects in schools, definitely the most important nature project in schools, the National Education Nature Park. So the NENP has already enrolled thousands of schools and students, hasn't it? It's quite remarkable success and sort of enthusiasm from the education sector for this. So how have you factored in the research on nature connectedness into what you're doing? Was that the right question?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks for having me, and really good to hear about everybody else's work on this area. And actually, I'm just back from the University of Derby Nature Connections annual conference, which was past couple of days. So I've been talking about this very topic. So this is really good timing. It's all sort of in my head at the moment. So yeah, the Nature Park launched in October 2023. So it's still a very young programme, and I know that lots of other projects people have been working on environmental education for a very long time. So we're sort of a toddler, but nonetheless have had a lot of engagement, a lot of registrations and schools going through the programme. So commissioned by Department for Education, which is super important because it means obviously children, young people, education sector are at the heart of this nature project, and delivered by partnership of organisations. So as you said, I'm from the Natural History Museum, so we're the lead partner, and then Royal Horticultural Society working with, they're doing a large part of the programme, and lots of others. We've got a website. Do have a look for some more information. We did publish an annual report at the end of our year one, and you can see who else is involved and get more from the programme than I can say in 5 minutes. With that in mind, I will press on. So it's for all schools, nurseries and colleges, free programme across England. It's England because education's devolved. Aim is to boost biodiversity on their sites, turn what might be grey spaces, might be really quite small spaces, but to get them a bit greener, using digital tools to map and survey these outdoor spaces. So it's a massive community science project, not been done before. And through all that, embedding climate and nature across subjects' key stages, and I'll come on to this a bit more, improving wellbeing and developing vital skills for the future. So on the topic of wellbeing, we've built this into the programme since the very start. So a lot of it is based on research by, for example, Miles Richardson and others on the pathways to nature connection, those 5 areas: contact, beauty, meaning, emotion and compassion. So the concept of Nature Park and a lot of the activities have that built in, embedded, and a lot of testing was done with children and staff before we launched. And it's also a really strong part of the evidence base and something that Department for Education are really interested in as well. So I was just going to mention a few specific examples of Nature Park activities that showcase that. So there's a 5-step cycle for Nature Park, which is purposefully a cycle because Nature Park's never done, and you keep coming back and exploring your site and finding out what's there and really noticing nature, ongoing interaction, keep coming back. So that's a really important part of Nature Park. We've got some entry engagement tools for students and staff to explore their site. So one's called Hidden Nature Challenge, and that's all about noticing nature, doing lessons, seeing more, and reflecting on your emotions as you spot things. And it could be you're spotting patterns in nature, a place with no nature, nature you didn't expect to see. And we've got various prompts, and it's a really, really easy activity. We've had like tens of thousands of submissions, and it will show up on a map so you can see that you're part of something bigger. We've got quite a lot of activities which are about reflection. So there's, for example, a point of view exercise where you imagine you're a blackbird or a worm on your school site, and you're sort of developing empathy, compassion for how it feels for them to be in your on your site. And then the habitat mapping, which is all to get data for museum and other scientists to have a look at so they can try and predict biodiversity gains across the education estate. But the activity of habitat mapping is a group activity. So that really fits with nature connectedness, and also exploring your emotions as you're doing the maps. And you might do it as an artwork activity, or we've got loads of like creative ways to explore your site. So with storytelling, with poetry, with art, across all different subjects. I saw there was a question in the chat about inner city schools and those with, hardly any outdoor space, and there's been a grants programme to go with Nature Park. So DFE made available up to £50 million over 3 years. 12 million's already gone out to over 1,300 settings that have high socioeconomic deprivation and low green space access. So really trying to get to those who might not ordinarily be able to do this sort of thing. And then taking action is the really important bit of Nature Park, deciding how to improve your space, how to make it greener for people and planet. And I know from reading Miles Richardson's work that taking action, really important part of nature connectedness. Just the final thing to say is really interested to hear about everybody's work here, because we've got a lot of anecdotes and quotes showing the positive benefits for pupils and importantly also staff. And as we go into year 3, we're hoping to do more research on this. So I know Wendy's been speaking to colleagues, and so we hope to use the expertise within our partnership and beyond, so that we can more fully monitor and evaluate nature park settings and the impacts on wellbeing.
Yes, that's fantastic. Gosh, I want everybody to speak 3 times as long. So that was really, really interesting. There's some really interesting stuff going on in the chat as well. It's so hard not to have 2 heads, isn't it? But panelists, do get stuck into sort of responding to some of these points that are rising, which are aimed at you, each of you in particular, but otherwise we'll come back to them.
Kim,
Yes.
Yeah, so can I, sorry.
Right.
Just
I'm going to go on. Catherine, I want to move on to Joe. Yeah.
Just sorry, just because there's a lot of information to take in with the whole group. I would suggest to not, because I held back to respond in the chat, because I want people to focus on the Joe, for example. So we're happy to come back, and if it doesn't fit within the hour, we offered this earlier in another event. We're happy to answer this later on online or via email. So just want to take out the pressure a little bit.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. So over to Joe. Where are you? Are you on camera? Can't see you. Where's your wonderful sunshine? So Joe, you're an experienced nature educator, and you and I have been working with a group of around 30 educators on a project to look at how to engage young people with nature to maximise the benefits. So could you just mention a couple of things that you think should be included in teacher training, perhaps, to help them maximise the well-being for their students when they spend time outdoors with them?
Absolutely, and that touches really pretty directly onto the principles that we've been working on co-producing with all of these other educators from lots of different kinds of education as well, which has been really interesting to take it away from the kind of most conventional traditional path to that, working in schools directly with pupils and things like that, looking at nature educators, alternative provision, things like that. So I could rattle through some of those principles, and hopefully that can stimulate a little bit of engagement in that. We've come through this process over about a year to 7 main principles, which we think are the kind of fundamentals for how we can bring nature engagement really centrally into education, and to do that across the curriculum.
Joe, maybe you just want to pick a couple, 2 or 3?
Yeah, I could pick 2 or 3.
It's just a teaser. We're going to publish it soon.
Oh, fabulous. So I think that the most important ones, really, in terms of the teachers working directly with pupils, experiencing nature firsthand, really leaning into that multi-sensory experience of being in situ, which in itself is really, really relaxing, but can also build that kind of experience when mediated carefully and generously. It can build exactly the kind of experience which helps pupils find that as a source of well-being rather than anxiety, both in school and in their wider lives. And so that, for both of us, has come through as one of the most essential principles. With that, we come across all of these issues of access to nature. And I think looking at diversifying our view of what nature means is another really important part of that. Pavement botany, some of these ideas that are a little bit more innovative, perhaps, maybe done through necessity sometimes. Looking at our urban ecologies, if that's what we live within, and understanding them as places of nature, as ourselves as part of the nature of that system, for me, that's a really, really calming thing. And it's pretty easy to find lichens or little kind of weeds or whatever, spiders in the corners and nooks and crannies of the room. That can be a really, really good reminder. And certainly for myself, that's something which supports my well-being and a bit of a recognition that there's more than just me in the room. And with that, I suppose we come to working close to school, and that can build that sense of place, which we've talked about quite often throughout this project and in my research outside of this project, as being really fundamental to well-being, feeling well and being well in a place, in kind of requires often a bit of a relationship to that place. And I think a lot of people don't have a particularly intentionally formed relationship to the places where they spend time. And schools are an amazing opportunity or schools have an amazing opportunity to cultivate that within their classes. So working nearby, whether that's school grounds, local parks, local nature reserves, if they're lucky enough to have one, places that pupils not only will encounter frequently in their school lives and outside of that, but also that they can return to over time. And I'm lucky to have been doing this now for over a decade, and you see people coming back to places and they tell you about things. They say, oh, I remember planting that tree and now it's, 3 meters tall. There's a real satisfaction that comes from that. And so I think that working close to school can cultivate that sense of place, which underpins some of the well-being and the reward that comes with that. So I'm happy to leave it there. We've got plenty of others to go over, but maybe you're right about leaving it as a bit of a teaser. And I'll open that out to the next.
Fantastic. So thanks so much, Joe. So turning to Alex now. There you are. So you and your colleagues have been closely involved in the Agile project. So can I ask you, what can the DFE do to support schools that would like to enlist nature to help students' well-being and achievements?
Thanks for the question, Kim. It's a huge question, so I'll do my best to answer it. And it's been really insightful to get the views and experience of other people working in this space. So I'm a researcher in the Sustainability and Climate Change Unit in the Department for Education, and I would say that the department is very well aware about a lot of the things that we've been talking about today. Well aware that there's a growing body of evidence linking access to nature, spending time in nature, with a range of positive health and learning outcomes for young people, that it helps people to develop a deeper understanding of the role that nature plays in their lives and in the protection of the planet in the context of climate change. But we also recognise that there's a need to know more, and that's my job as an analyst, synthesising evidence and commissioning research and whatnot. So that's why we've been supporting the research that Katrin and others at the university are doing. So I won't talk about that. That's already been spoken about. We also recognise that further research and evidence synthesis in this space will help us to better understand some of the problems that we bump up against, and some of those have kind of come up here today, barriers for schools and teachers and things like that, but also some of the specific benefits of spending time in nature, specific types of activities, which ones are most impactful for which outcomes. And this has been this bit of discussion about this in the chat, that we also are acutely aware that access to the benefits provided by nature is unevenly distributed, with the most disadvantaged the least likely to reap the rewards. And this problem is particularly important now in the context of the government's opportunity mission, which the DFE leads on, as the government and the department work towards breaking down barriers to opportunity. So work by Natural England has shown children in deprived areas have less green space and spend less time outdoors than those in affluent areas. Deprived inner city areas, which mentioned earlier, have about a fifth the amount of good quality green space than children in the most deprived areas. Children in the most deprived areas spend about 20% less time outside. So all of this, in the context of that opportunity mission, limits opportunities for health, well-being, development, career choices, even reinforcing those barriers that the department wants to break down. In terms of what we're doing and what we can do, people who are following work in this space will see that the department is reviewing lots of things. So we know we have the opportunity mission with its goal to set children up for the best start in life, all children achieving and thriving. There's a skills and growth agenda within that as well. We've got the curriculum and assessment review underway. You also know that the department in 2022 published the Sustainability and Climate Change Strategy. This is something my team specifically responsible for. Previously, that has emphasised the importance of young people growing up with an appreciation of nature and an understanding of climate change. And that's something that is currently under review and is being refreshed. So I think you can say we still believe that our education settings must play their part to shape a sustainable future and help young people develop positive behaviours. And as Jess has articulated as well, one intervention the department has already launched and is doing very well, as you say, thousands of schools signed up, is the National Education Nature Park, which, whilst focusing largely front and centre, is all about improving biodiversity across the education estate, has those wider reaching benefits that support the various challenges that schools and education faces, including mental and physical health, but also things like behaviour and attendance, but also that development of connection to nature, science, analytical and digital mapping skills, like Jess said, a huge citizen science project, all while supporting their mental and physical well-being whilst learning outside. So I maybe had a few minutes to talk a little bit more there, Kim, but that's it from me.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Alex. Right, Catherine, I'm going to come back to you right at the end, but I just want to give us a moment to have a look through the chat. There's been some really interesting comments. Obviously, people looking to connect with you guys in the panel. So do have a look at that and make connections if you want, people interested in your research. There's a few questions about how do we persuade senior leaders in schools around that sort of topic. I think that's kind of what the cost benefit analysis is all about. It's trying to make the business case in my business head speak. So why should people like Stuart, why should other Stuarts around the country do what he does or allows to happen in his school? I saw Ellie had a question about how do you actually do the baselining? Well, that's really interesting because actually I'm seeing more teachers interested in studying for themselves within their own schools. How do you actually prove within your own school that taking them outside is a good thing? It's quite a difficult thing to do. So Ellie's asking a question there about getting a baseline before and after a pilot, which I think might be something we can get you together, Ellie, with one of the researchers here. If anybody wants to sort of pop a question in or just raise a hand, then please do. Roger's put a hand up there. Go ahead, Roger.
I was just wondering if there seem to be, thanks Kim, several questions around starting something, persuading a leadership team, getting on with this, finding evidence. And I just wanted to respond with some of that generally, that, well, hopefully, I know people asking for recordings. Well, yes, it's being recorded. Hopefully this evidence and other ways, other outputs that we have from this project will provide good evidence. And one of the strands we're particularly looking at is implementation, But in general, thinking about showing this is worth it. I think if you were in the position of wanting to persuade a leadership team or your line manager about this, having a clear idea of the benefit. Hopefully, as I say, this will provide some evidence. So what benefits are there going to be for kids? Because something that senior leaders are continually asking themselves is, why would we do this? How does it benefit the children? So you need to have a clear answer to that. What you need, very clear idea of what you need from them. And then also, it doesn't have to be all at once. So you can roll things out. So maybe a plan of how something might be rolled out rather than all at once, and timescales. And also another thing, I think I don't know particularly to do with nature-based programs, but there was, I've forgotten who mentioned it in the chat, sorry, but a school garden. There's a kind of little voice in the back of the head that may be, oh, there's going to be a garden we're going to set up, it's going to be lovely, and then 2 years later, when the person who did that has left to go on to other things, or it's more difficult, it just looks a mess because it hasn't been sustained. So sustainability, what's the plan for sustaining that, and thinking about those things in advance to approaching somebody with your idea, I think will be very persuasive.
Yeah. Can I bring Stuart in?
Yeah, thank you. I would say, yeah, absolutely. But one of the key things that, you know, that I talk about quite regularly is what's the need? Is there a need for something? So I'm also the Senko at the school, so we've been looking at attendance for lots of different groups, and not only from a horticultural perspective, but some students may have an interest in different projects and doing things outside. So bringing their bike in, with one student recently, we've with another member of staff who had an interest in it, they worked together to improve and mend his brakes on the individual's bike, and then they were able to ride it around the school site to try it out. So simple things that you can do in different ways, and that wouldn't necessarily matter if you're in an urban setting or a more rural setting like we are. It's thinking about where's a need. Do we need to engage an individual? Do we need to look at a wider group within the school and make a small tweaks and changes? Can we use our outdoor space? Can we think of a project that would engage them in coming back in, so they have that sense of belonging that Joseph was mentioning about, and that community cohesion, wanting to come back to do things again. Oh, I remember when this, and it sparks a conversation with lots of other people around the school at the same time, and it enables us to then, with these individuals where we've done things outside, make sure that all of their teachers know about that, so they will then come in into a lesson or around the school site, lunch and break, and have that conversation with them, and it builds the relationships within the school. It gives opportunities for other people to share their experiences and what they could do, and attendance improves, behavior around the school site improves, the challenges they were having in a particular lesson, their relationship with those members of staff now are better, so they're more engaged and wanting to start learning in the classroom. And it gives them an experience, a shared experience together that they can talk about. So it brings people together. And if you can use some of those key markers, like getting children into school or improving attendance or developing, a more thorough curriculum with a key stage 3 that will develop their knowledge when they get to key stage 4, that they've got something else to talk about, can only be a good thing. And elements of that can be measured. Wellbeing surveys within the school. Try a little project, pick individual groups, get some baseline figures, whether it is a simple wellbeing survey, look at it again at the end, get them to resit it. And but the relations that you can develop outside with teachers, with students, peripatetic staff, support staff, it doesn't matter, only bring together those individuals into school, so they have a better experience in school, more likely to come in, behavior improves, and as a result of that, concentration too, and achievement at the end of it. And although that's not an immediate, you can't always get an immediate measurable data set, over time you can see those things grow, and the patterns of soft data and behavior will improve within the school. And that's something that we've really tried to do. And luckily I'm on the SLT, so I can preach from the top as well. But again, look at, is there a need? Identify that need, and then see if there's some small projects and things that you can do just to get the ball rolling, and then that will, pardon the pun, grow.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. That really speaks to something that Joe and I have been speaking about, Joe Boyle and I, about the fact that it isn't just nature, it's the way in which you do nature, it's the way in which the humans interact with one another, and the way the adults interact and treat the children in whatever setting it is. And there was a question on an earlier call that we had with DFE this morning about, how do you disaggregate sort of good engagement with nature engagement, or the impact of nature? And I think that's very difficult, because nature, the impacts of any nature engagement activity you do are completely affected by the way you do it and how nice you are to people. But there's definitely something in there about the human-to-human relationships within nature, which we can explore on another occasion, I hope. I wanted to, if there's no more comments from the panel or anybody else, I can't really see. So I wanted then to come back to Katrin, if I may. And just also, you kicked us all off with a fantastic question, both for this research project and for this whistle-stop tour through this topic. So I give you a couple of minutes now to sort of talk about what you and your colleagues are going to look at next.
Thank you, Kim. Do I have another 5 minutes again? Is that correct?
Yeah, you think you do, yeah.
some of the, because I also kind of want to pick up on the threads which are in the chat, because I know it's on people's mind and it's connected to what I'm going to say. And just to build up on what you just said. So from our research, what we understand, and this is hopefully gives hope to schools which are not perfect, but might have to deal with gray spaces or indoor. I think Laura mentioned something when kids can't go outside. What we consider in our research is any green space effect or impact. So think of views out of windows. This is very old research from 1984 from hospitals that already has an effect. And I know we have like this assumption that nice teachers have a good effect on kids in terms of nature program delivery. But imagine, and this is probably also reality for many, sometimes teachers are stressed out too, and you might have a stressful environment in the classroom. You can't ignore the effect nature still has. So I just wanted to make that point, that we're not only looking at active engagement with nature, but we're trying to understand the whole portfolio you might have at your display and choice to pick from, and really trying to encourage schools to think creatively from their starting point. What do you have at play? What does your school ground look like? Because most of the school grounds, together with the teachers and kids, will have some opportunity to work with nature in their education. So that's my assumption from the get-go. So I just wanted to open up our minds to other settings on the spectrum of what schools might have available in terms of green space. And it leads into this next stage of our research. As Kim has pointed out, this is only the starting of a very long journey, I believe, because we have all this evidence, and this has been a fantastic opportunity to hear from other people, and especially the National Education Nature Park efforts, which is huge. And I've heard from Katie recently that you've now doubled the numbers of schools which have signed up, which is absolutely amazing within 12 months. Now, what we're interested in, especially through the collaboration with the Department for Education, is how do we harmonize all the data you're collecting? And by that, I mean everything qualitatively, like Stuart was referring to conversations with the kids and teachers, that counts as something, but also quantitatively. And the situation we're currently faced with is that there's a huge variety of data types we need to look at and make sense of, and bringing Saba back into the conversation. We had almost 12 or 9 months to talk about how do we feed this cost-benefit model, that it actually tells us something and helps across the scales to make decisions. So that's certainly a next step we want to take to contribute to the field further of these 3 stakeholder groups. Teachers on the ground, education sector, delivery of education and nature-based programs, then the government, and then research itself, right? Just 3 different groups of stakeholders here who are interested in this field. And so the next steps really from this project, because it's called a sprint, Now, sprint in this context means 12 months, which for an academic, this is a real sprint, but for a policy professional, this is sort of I don't know, Alex, what do you call that, a jog, because the turnaround in policy is rather quick. But it has initiated a lot of new projects. So currently in the process of applying for further funding to continue the research. We're also sort of wrapping up the Agile Sprint project at the moment. And I believe Chess, Lorimer has shared, or Alison potentially has shared some links in the chat. And here I just wanted to point out that we are considering, we are producing not only scientific or the classic academic outputs, but we have a whole portfolio of what we call alternative outputs. And it starts with a youth co-produced glossary people can fall back on when they want to have or start these conversations around nature-based programs, because what we need to find also, apart from evidence, which is robust, is a common language. And what do we actually mean when we talk about nature and nature-based programs?
Katrin, I think that's a fantastic place to round up. Thank you very much. We need more information. We need researchers. So I just want to say thank you so much to all our panelists for being so brilliant in making some brilliant points and keeping to time. You've been fantastic. And I hope this has been a really rich offering to people at the end of a very hot day. And this will be available as a recording, and we'll pull out as well some of your amazing comments and make sure that they are appropriately shared or responded to. So thank you very much for doing that. Thank you very much to everybody who has come to take part and for your thoughtfulness in contributing. Thank you so much to Laura and the rest of the Oxford Education Deanery for hosting us, to Jo for setting everything up and making it all work seamlessly in spite of my frequent panics. Thank you so much to the Agile team for supporting the project and this webinar. Thank you, of course, to the funders, to NERC and the Oxford Martin School for funding this project, and to the Oxford Martin School for funding Jo's project that he was talking about. I hope you found something in this discussion that's useful. Please do keep in touch, and importantly, share what you're doing with each other and other people so that we can all amplify this message about, you know, this is normal. Let's make time in nature normal again. We have the capacity between us to heal our kids, ourselves, and the rest of the natural world in the process. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your evening.